today Dr. Wei Wang, who is the Senior Director of the Association for Talent Development. It is good to have you again, Doctor, and we look forward to having a discussion again about learning and development professionals. And I would like to start this interview by asking you, how is the role and status of L&D professional has changed in recent years?
I think that's a really great question. I think it's the L&D professionals' role has been more important than ever. Historically, we have been as the thought leader and of the field and the champion of L&D field. We always talking about L&D is really important, but I think the pandemic really accelerated that process. We see anecdotally and the research also showing that L&D is become more important. They even become a frontline workers during the pandemic, help organization to being transitioned to the emergency mode, the pandemic mode, and now transfer back to the normal mode. So it definitely, we hear like L&D professionals has been playing more important role internally and having more strategic roles, and there's more strategic interaction with other business development. And also more important, in general, we see that report show that there's more L&D budget that been allocated. So for L&D department to spend. So that's all very positive signs.
So in that case, what if they have more budget? So what are the top priorities for L&D professionals these days?
I think the first most important is to really make sure that L&D the initiatives really having a good alignment of business needs. And as I mentioned in the previous interview, that as part of my job, I travel around the world talking to people in the field. And very often I heard the question is, how can I demonstrate my importance? How can I being taken more seriously, becoming, instead of order taker, I become more business partner? I would say the most important thing is you really have to demonstrate that your value to the organization. That means you really need to understand the business needs and make sure your learning initiatives is really aligned with those business needs. I think that's really the first priority. You need to make sure you understand the business needs, especially today, right? In our our world, the change happening so rapidly. Organization is all the organization need to be agile and need to be future ready. So as a learning professionals, we really need to be not just focusing on what we are doing here in our learning field, but also really looking at a bigger picture, what our organizations need today and then in the future, and be prepared to support the talent development in that way.
Right. What are the most important capabilities for L&D professionals to be successful and effective in today's world?
So ATD have been conducting the capability research during the past 20 years. Every 3, 4, 5 years, ATD will conduct the research to identify what's important capabilities in our field. And the latest one was released in beginning of 2020, and we continue to tracking that the capability, the development. So in 2020, when we conduct the research on what are the most important capabilities, the top 5 capabilities, this is rated by a professional L&D professional around the world, is communication, lifelong learning, instructional design, training, delivery, and facilitation, emotional intelligence, and decision making. Those are being rated as top 5 most important capabilities for L&D professionals. So in 2022, we repeated the research. We asked people again, what are the most important capabilities that for L&D professional in today's world? And there has been some significant changes. So the top one is still the same, communication. And the second one, guess what? Is technology application. Obviously, giving the technology development, AI, ChatGPT, all those different technologies we can leverage and we use. And the technology application is become a number 2 important capabilities. Number 3 is emotional intelligence and decision making. as I mentioned earlier, this is in general is what our human being need to develop the capability, is that decision making and emotional intelligence. That's something like the machine cannot take away from us. And number 4 is cultural and awareness and inclusion. Obviously, this we heard a lot about DEI, the issues and the training, and that's been playing a really critical role in many parts of the world. So the cultural awareness inclusion become important. And last but not least, top 5 is change management. That's where we also see a lot anecdotally and the research showing previously, training or development is more about, okay, how to conduct training well, how to conduct the course well in the classroom. But now our role is really expanded from the classroom to the virtual world and to the whole organization. We see during the pandemic, L&D has becoming a really critical role to help organization ready for the change and continue facilitate that change. I think that after pandemic, this trend will continue. We hear a lot when I was talking with some professional from Canada, they also say, hey, this change management has become so important for us. Everybody need to take the change management courses. And we heard the same thing from Mexico, because they just say, oh, we just used to develop trainings, but now we're asked to help organization ready for the new initiatives, help people to understand the new initiatives. So that's change management, right? So change management become another important capabilities and priorities for L&D professionals.
We spoke about L&D, how can they motivate people to learn? So how can L&D professionals develop themselves?
That's a really great question. That's where I usually see a lot of actually a mistake that L&D people are making. They can, when you look at an organization learning budget, the number 1 usually go to leadership development, right? So our research also 20 to 30% go to leadership development, that executive development, management development. But when you ask them, okay, so what learning budget you have for your training development itself, it's usually very little. And they say like, oh, we cannot spend money ourselves. It's kind of like a doctor. You say, well, I'm a doctor. I don't go to see doctors. As we know, that's ridiculous, right? Another analogy I always give is kind of, we are, as a learning development professional, we kind of like a chef. And our learning budget is kind of like our materials, right? The food, the ingredients. If you don't know how to cook, if you don't develop your cooking skills, even you have all those ingredients, you have a huge learning budget, you are not going to know how to cook a delicious meal to meet your customers' needs. That's where we see organizations spend tons of marketing learning budget, but not necessarily bring a good result. So that's have a lot to do whether as a cook, as the learning development professionals, whether we have the skills really or capabilities to understand organization needs and developing solutions or working with the vendors, providing that solution, the right solution for organization and knowing what result they bring in. So, I think it's really critical for learning and development professionals to develop ourselves. I originally grew up in China and I came to US to study for my PhD from Penn State on training and development. One of the reasons for me to do that is because in China, we don't have that such kind of program. In many parts of the world, it still today is the same. There's not necessarily a major in college that you study training and development, right? So we kind of becoming an accidental trainer or we kind of learn by doing it. So I think, in today's world, it's really critical for L&D professionals to invest their own professional learning because many people not necessarily have the professional training in the school. And the learning and development is really is a major, it is a profession that has a knowledge, has the skills, has a capability that you need to study. So ATD's capability, I think that's a really great start. We have a free capability assessment tool on the ATD website, and more than 20,000 people, literally from all countries, has been taking that assessment. And that's really a great tool to help you to understand the roadmap, to be successful in the field what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge, what kind of behavior you need to do in order to be successful. And once you do the assessment and you can identify where the gaps is and making the decision where I wanted to be and how can I close that gap. And some maybe you can take advantage of ATD courses, and ATD and Informa has courses offered in the Middle East region and virtually around the world. Or in some cases, maybe reading a book or reading some articles or finding some tools or taking some other learning resources. So I think the important thing is to having a framework that you can rely on. So you are not going to feel like lost or where I should be. Like you feel, more there's a guided path for you. And I think that's the first thing. You need to have a framework you can rely on. Second is really, putting that wrong assumption away. You need, as a learning and development professional, you need learning and development for yourself. So, investing the time, either you self-study or, taking some courses, attending conferences, and all that is the time is that your investment yourself, your own learning is, you can only develop others after you develop yourself. So I think making that commitment is important, for yourself. And three, I think, having that strategic conversation with your leaders. The part of a challenge where I see a lot of people say, oh, I cannot get this training budget approved for myself or for my team. I think, there's an assumption, right? So we all need to work to change that assumption. So you need to build in that strategic conversations, help people to understand that training is a profession. As a profession, there are profession knowledges, skills that you need to obtain, and you need to invest to those people in order to develop those professionalism. So building that in strategic conversation with your leaders to fight for that learning budget opportunity or learning opportunities, I think is critical.
Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you again today.
Thank you.